Hey now, it's charcuterie time. Now, I'm still riding the high of my great success with my culatello. That was an incredibly delightful, rich, flavorful, yet really basic recipe, but it took over 3 freaking years to make. Now, I want to make something that is just really nice, delicate, delightful, a little bit of flavor going on, but a simple recipe, but something that's going to have a much quicker turnaround time. So I'm going to run with some prosciutto. All right, now here's the part where I'm going to really deviate from some traditional action here. So typically the prosciutto comes from a particular cut off of the ham and it's hung. You've probably seen fancy prosciuttos being hung in shops if you've been in Italy or different butchery shops here in the West. But what I'm doing here today is my good old friend pork loin. We're going to make a pork loin prosciutto, okay? Yeah, I know this isn't traditional. I know there are differences with the cut. I don't care. I've had some really, really good, I mean, I do care. I wish I had the proper cut and I would probably just use that. However, the pork loin is relatively inexpensive, very easy to get. I've got one here right now. So this is going to be a little bit of an experiment because I haven't tried this for this sort of delicate flavor of a piece of charcuterie in the past. So come along for the ride. All right, I've got this big old pork loin here. This is over 11 pounds. I'm going to take this, it's currently cryovac. I'm just going to get it out of this bag. I'm going to rinse it off and pat it dry. So here's the loin, like I said, rinsed, dried off, ready to work with. Now, a quick word about things. Two things you need to know. First of all, we're going with an equilibrium cure. This means that the amount of salt, the amount of seasoning, everything that I'm packing into this, the cure, that is exactly what I want in the finished product. I'm not adding extra and then having to freshen afterwards or anything like that. Therefore, what I'm going to be doing here is everything is then done by weight. Now, the easiest way to do this is in grams. Sorry to my imperial friends. Grams just, it's math. It makes way more sense. So what I've done here is I've got the weight in grams, which is 5,149, 5,149. And all of these ingredients that I'm mentioning, I mean, there are only 4 of them, but when I give you a percentage, you simply multiply the weight of your meat times 3% or 2.75%, whatever. It's incredibly easy math that makes it so you can take any size of meat and make it work. Okay, and get the exact same product in the end. I actually run this on a spreadsheet. See, just like that. Got this in a spreadsheet here. I've got my ingredients, I have the percentage, and I let it run all the math for me. That way, it's incredibly easy, and I actually don't need to mess around with the calculator, just ever, really. You set it up in sheets. So if you're capable of doing that, highly recommend it, especially if it's recipes that you like. Now, I also have the calculation demonstrated in an example in the video description. Okay, so I think that's everything I need to rant about. Equilibrium cure. And yeah, we're doing everything by percentages because it makes way more sense for repeatability. So let's do this. All right, I have a very simple 4-ingredient cure here, and you can actually cut it down a little bit if you wanted to. I'm starting off with the salt. It's 2.75% of my meat weight, which in this case gets me, 142.835 grams worth of kosher salt. Then I've got my cure. I'm going with cure number 2. It's the sodium nitrate cure. So this could be prog powder number 2. It could be Instacure number 2. Really depends on whatever company you're running with. Now, some of the cure products out there give you different percentages recommended for the meat. Go with that. I'm going with 0.25%, but if they recommend something different, please do that. That's a matter of safety. I've got garlic powder. Now, this would be optional here. This isn't necessarily something you would find maybe in every prosciutto that's out there, but I wanted to get just a little bit. I'm going with 0.1%, of that garlic powder. And then I've got my black pepper here, and that is 0.25%. And I'm just going to get that in there. Woo. All right, and I'm going to give it a quick mix here, and then we're ready to get it on the meat. Here we are, meat tub. barely fitting this pork loin, and I've got my cure, and I like to do it in these meat tubs here. I'm going to get a nice sort of even initial coating. Obviously, we're having some splash off and whatnot here from the meat, but at least this way, we're getting some salt, some cure, some garlic powder, and some of that pepper over every little piece. All right, there we are. I got the ends, I got the top and the bottom here, and we are ready to get this into a bag. For this curing process, I'm going to use the world's longest vacuum seal bag here for this. I mean, with this, if you're going to use Ziploc bags, you'd have to probably cut it into a few different pieces or whatever and get it into there. I don't really like the Ziploc bags. I find that sometimes they can leak a little bit, whereas I'm not going to have that issue here, which is why I'm doing it. Now, we've got this, oh my goodness, this giant, long piece of meat. And I've got an assistant here for this. Angle it over top of the bin a little bit. Perfect. And I'm going to drop it. Boink. Okay, now, with this here, I still have a little bit of, like I was saying, that sort of splash off of the cure, the salt, the pepper, garlic powder, and whatnot. You can see how much I managed to scrape up there. And I'm just going to drop it into the bag there. And once I have that all in, we will be ready to vacuum seal. And having that longer bag, I gave myself a little bit of room at the bottom and then also at the top here. It's going to make the actual vacuum sealing process just a little bit easier. There we are. Now, you don't really have to get a perfect vacuum on this if you don't want to. I mean, it doesn't matter. Liquid's going to come leaching out during this curing process and get all into the bag. But one other nice thing about letting it get a bit of a vacuum is because I do want this to be a little bit skinnier as a prosciutto, pork loin prosciutto, that will actually help that happen. So now I'm just going to get some information on the bag. And by way of information on there, I just had the name of the product, the date, and then that original weight of this, just so that I have easy access to that later on and don't have to look at the video to remember. At this point, I'm hitting the refrigerator with this. This would probably be ready in 2.5-ish weeks. It's a little bit thicker at this end, maybe a little bit longer. I am going to give it longer than that though, just to give time for everything to fully penetrate this meat, especially just that black pepper and a little bit of that garlic, just so that it gets in there nicely. Every day, every other day, something like that, I'm going to get in there, just give it a little massage, flip things around a little bit, and just show it a little bit of love. So it's been 4.5 weeks since I started this curing here, which is more time than I needed for the actual curing. I imagine 2.5 weeks would have been more than sufficient. However, I wanted to give this time for maximum flavor penetration of those very mild seasonings that I have in here. So now it is time to begin the next phase of this pork loins journey, this giant pork loins journey. So I'm just going to pop this loin out of here and get it patted dry with some paper towel. So I've just popped this out of the bag here, and if you've seen some of my other charcuterie videos, you've seen that in the past I've typically rinsed off these pieces of meat, got them all nice and patted dry after that, just to kind of, in my mind, reset what I had going on flavor-wise. However, this time I'm going to do as a couple of my friends do and just go with it like so. I'm just drying it off a little bit here. There is still some moisture on here, but that's going to help our pasted hog skin casing here just adhere a little bit nicer. For this dry aging process, I want to have the pork loin here just in a bit of a casing of some sort. I'm using a pasted hog skin sheet here, actually 2 of them, because this is so large. I've just got a slight overlap here, and that's all good. I have sprayed down my cutting board here just with some vinegar that I've got in the spray bottle. I'm also going to be spraying down the inside of this pasted hog skin here. We're just trying to make sure that I don't have any sort of unwanted mold growth underneath anything there. Then I can take my ridiculously long pork loin and I can begin the process here of just getting it wrapped up. So I'm going to tuck over the sides here. I probably could have cut just the second one here in half and gone with that, but I didn't want to risk being just a little bit too short, and honestly a half piece of this pasted hog skin isn't really going to do a whole lot for me anyway. Now I'm just going to begin what I consider to be the wildest part of this whole process, which is getting this cased charcuterie into the netting here. Now typically I have a friend or a family member here to help me out with that. However, I'm flying solo right now, so this is going to be real fun. I'm going to have to cut a bunch of this out because it might get really embarrassing. But now I do have this was soaking in vinegar, so it is also in that clean sanitary state. And I'm just going to start to get it over top here. Now I did overlap this direction here, so this is over top. That'll help prevent this from sliding up once I'm trying to get over top of this point here. So wish me luck. Okay, we've got it started. That's the hard part. I'm just going to keep rolling it up gently, hopefully not messing up this pasted hog skin too much here. So there are different products that you can use for wrapping. I know if it's a smaller piece, you can get away with like some beef middles or something like that if you want to go a little bit more on the natural kind of casing end of things. I like these pasted hog skins. I also actually prefer the collagen casings. I find they're a little bit more resistant
to tearing if you do have to do some wild manipulation of it. However, the store I went to was out of them, so I got these pasted hog skins. I've used them many times before. They do work just fine. It's just when they're dry, they are a little bit more brittle. And just because they are a little bit more awkward to work with when they are dry, that is another part of the reason why I like to spritz these down with vinegar, just because getting them more moist like that helps prevent any sort of tearing. Okay, I gotta say, I'm really proud of myself there. This worked out really quite well. I don't know why I bother other people to help me out doing this. So now, just to close up the ends here, I could tie them up with some string, or I could just try to knot them, but I've got these hog ring pliers and some half-inch hog rings. I'm going to use that. I mean, if you've got the tools, use them. I really like how this works out. If you're looking for some of the tools or materials that I'm using for this project, I will have a list of as many as I can in the video description if you're looking just to pick them up from online. And then the final step, I'm just going to use my sausage pricker here and just give some pokes around to help prevent there being the possibility of air pockets, because if there are air pockets inside this, then you can wind up with, again, some undesirable mold growth underneath. And it can sometimes be hard to tell until it's far too late. But either way, here we are. We're netted. I'm just going to cut off the excess, a little bit of that. I like to leave a little bit, but I certainly don't need 6 inches of it. Now I am just going to get a pre-hanging weight on this so that I can get this tagged up and then we can get it into the curing chamber. I have written down my original weight and then my target weight, and that's with the 35% weight loss. So let's get this down to the curing chamber. All right, so my curing chamber is actually empty at the moment other than this piece of meat that's coming in here. So I'm just going to get this hanging and get the curing chamber all fired up here and we'll be ready to rock. So for the curing chamber here, I have the temperature set at 53 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see we're almost down there. That's just going to fluctuate up and down a little bit. And I have the relative humidity set at 72%. And we have this beautiful piece of meat hanging in here and the waiting game continues. So it's been around 2.5 months. I'll have to double check the precise number of weeks it's been since this went in the curing chamber, but we have hit the weight that we're after, which was 35% weight loss here, and we're ready for the next simple step. For this, I'm simply going to peel off this netting here, and now there is some mold growth on this, which is fine, other than I don't want to vacuum seal this, which is what we're going to be doing here for equalization. I don't want to vacuum seal it with all that mold on there. Typically, I'll just vacuum seal these as is. However, with this amount of mold on here, I am just going to peel off the casing and then we can vacuum seal it like that. All right, here we go. That pasted hog skin casing was a little bit of a hassle to remove pre-equalization just because that was the driest part, obviously, but I managed to get it off. We're all ready to go here. Now for the equalization part, just where we're going to be able to balance out the slightly drier exterior and the slightly more moist interior. Balance that out. I just like to do that via vacuum sealing here. Here we are, vacuum sealed, ready for equalization. I'm just going to write the product and the date on this and get it into the refrigerator. I'll probably wind up giving this about 4 weeks in there just to make sure we have a good equalization. We've had 4 weeks here. It's time to crack into this massive, long pork loin and see how this prosciutto tastes. Woo! Smells good. I'm getting pepper, all kinds of stuff out of this. All right, I'm actually gonna slice this maybe about here. I sort of like that division a little bit better. And let's take a look. Right there, beautiful, cured, completely even throughout. We got a taste. All right, so I'm slicing this up here on my Avanco SL10 meat slicer. I absolutely love using this unit here. I can get the meat as thin as I like it. It's all flavor country. Ooh, you can see me behind it. All right, let's taste. Oh, it smells delicious. Okay, I just ate a few pieces in a row. I didn't want to stop to talk. This is incredibly delicious. It's a very, very delicate, lightly flavored charcuterie here. We've got that perfect amount of salinity to it. There's just a hint of that garlic. There's some of the peppercorn in there. This is going to be a delightful charcuterie for pizza, which I'm making tonight. It's going to go great on sandwiches, just with a charcuterie board, all kinds of things. Incredibly versatile charcuterie. All right, I need to slice up more of this. Having gone with this somewhat fattier piece of pork loin with that fat cap that was running around it is really paying off here in the end product, because I do have some of that fat coming along just like you would have in a regular piece of prosciutto coming off of the ham there. Incredibly delicious. All right, I gotta go make pizza and ate probably most of this here tonight. There you have it. Give it a whirl. Really easy way to make something that very closely resembles prosciutto. And if you do it, let me know how it turns out. Until next time, keep it at 11.